flinched. Was this Rob's walkie, or something imitating my walkie? Then it emerged. Welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome to Dark Secrets, where we tell real cryptid reports in an immersive storytelling format. Now, if you're into cryptids like Bigfoot, Wendigos, the Dogman, or if you just like a good story, you are in the right place. This week, I've got a reported encounter with pale crawlers. And don't worry, if you don't know what pale crawlers are, if you haven't heard of pale crawlers, I'm going to give you a short description of what these beings are supposed to be. And I've got 3 super short encounters that are confirmed that you can look up on Wiki, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about before we get into the main story, which, may I add, is probably one of the creepiest stories I've told to date. What is a pale crawler? They are said to be humanoid creatures, described as thin and pale, with long limbs and claws and large black eyes. They're known to be incredibly fast, stealthy, and smart, often luring their victims deeper into the woods. Here are 3 quick, confirmed, reported encounters that can easily be found on Wiki. June 14th, 2008. Near a forested area in Higgins Lake, Michigan, in which 2 unnamed men were injured and 1 was killed. Police passed it off as a bear attack, officially. The validity of the bear attack is unlikely, as video that has since conveniently been lost was shown to have disproved that theory. July 23rd, 2013. In upstate New York, near Niagara, a crawler was seen by a park ranger who would lose his job due to unruly conduct, poor mental capability, and an inability to distinguish reality from fiction. The crawler was caught on camera, but the Ranger Service confiscated it as official evidence. April 19th, 2022. Near Elkhorn, Wisconsin, a sighting of a possible crawler occurred on the intersection of Tell and Bray. Due to its location, it has been debated whether this was a crawler, Fleshgate, or the Beast of Bray Road. Now that you have a rough idea of what we're talking about, let's get into today's story. I'm super excited. This story gave me chills when I read it. It's gotta be one of the creepier stories I've reported on. Let's get into it. Pale crawlers lured us off the trail. Me and my best friend Rob was setting out to hike the North Country Trail in Michigan. Little did we know, this hike was going to change our lives forever. We probably were only about 2 miles into our hike when all the weirdness started. I remember hearing a chainsaw off in the distance. I didn't think a whole lot of it at first, but after about another quarter mile, Rob spoke up. "Do you hear that chainsaw?" "Yes." "Why?" "The sound's been coming directly from our right for half a mile now, like it's following us." I stopped and for the first time paid real close attention to the sound. It was definitely a chainsaw, but something was eerily off about it. It was revving and going back to idle, but it never changed pitch. A chainsaw bogs down and changes tones when cutting through wood. This sounded like a broken record on repeat of someone revving a chainsaw but not cutting anything. I pointed this observation out to Rob, and he agreed how strange it was. Maybe someone was in the need of help. Rob pulled out a whistle and gave it a hard blow. The chainsawing stopped, and we heard a whistle just like Rob's ring out back to us. Rob darted off the trail blowing his whistle, heading towards the sound of the responding whistle. I followed closely behind. It sounded like the sound was only maybe 100 or 200 yards off the trail. But after some time, I noticed that the sound was not getting closer. I grabbed Rob's arm. "Stop!" Rob looked at me with confusion. "Rob, we have been hoofing it for at least 500 yards, and that whistle sound has not gotten any closer. It's moving away from us at the same speed we're moving towards it." Rob hesitated before blowing his whistle one more time. The responding whistle was definitely just as far out as it had been when we started. Rob's eyes widened. Is someone trying to lead us off the trail? Why? We're gonna be part of some crazy murder mystery? I don't know, Rob. First thing we need to do is get back to the trail. Let's turn our walkie-talkies on in case we get separated. As we both turned them on, there was a bit of a screech from the walkies. That didn't bother us, that was normal. But not 30 yards in the thicket, we heard an exact replica of the screech our walkies just made. We bolted for the trail, both falling every now and then and taking slightly different paths around fallen logs and vegetation. This part was all a blur of fear and adrenaline. I busted through some vegetation and was on the trail again. I breathed a slight breath of relief as I said, "Look, Rob, we made it this far." But no response. Rob was nowhere in sight. I immediately called him on the walkie. "Rob, where are you?" As I released the button, the walkie made a short static sound that was quickly replicated just inside the brush line. I flinched. Was this Rob's walkie? Or something imitating my walkie? Then it emerged, just enough for me to see its face. Real quick before we get back into this story, if you're enjoying how we tell real cryptid reports in an immersive format, please drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn notifications on. These completely free, simple steps helps a small channel like this one grow on YouTube, and it keeps our videos from being buried down in your feed by all the bigger channels. So in advance, thank you for your support. Now let's get back to that story. Then it emerged just enough for me to see its face. Hollow, empty black eyes, pale white skin, and a bizarre, distorted mouth. It moved in a jolting, disturbing way. Then it cocked its head and opened its mouth. The sound that came out made my stomach crawl into my throat as I heard Rob's voice calling my name. I dropped my radio and started sprinting down the trail. Directly behind me, I heard that thing calling to me in Rob's voice. Behind and slightly to my right, I heard the chainsaw noise, and behind and to the left, I heard the walkie static. There was 3. I remember how blurry the trail was. I was so frightened that I was crying. I ran so hard for so long till everything just went black. I woke up to paramedics checking my vitals. I was confused and immediately started fighting them. They did their best to restrain me while repeating, it's okay, we're not gonna hurt you." I finally relaxed a little. "Where am I?" One of the paramedics responded. "A group of hikers called us and reported that you had ran up on them terrified and then collapsed to the ground. We're in the ambulance, heading to the hospital." I responded, "Did you find Rob?" The paramedics looked confused. "No, it was just you. Is there another person out there in need of assistance?" "Yes," I replied, and began frantically babbling about what happened to us. The paramedics then injected something into my IV and asked me to calm down and told me that I was in shock. I woke up in the hospital. Other than scrapes, cuts, and bruises, I was fine. And an officer was waiting in the room. His first question was if I had any more details on Rob and where he might be. My heart sank at this question, as it meant Rob has not been found. Search parties looked for Rob for 3 days. The police were highly skeptical of me, as I was the last person with him and my story was, well, crazy. In the end, there was no evidence of foul play. Really, there was no evidence at all. The only thing the search party found was my walkie I dropped when that thing spoke. I say spoke, but it wasn't speaking. It sounded more like a slightly distorted, disturbing recording. In the end, Rob's disappearance was labeled as an animal attack. Rob's friends and family, and some of mine, sent a lot of hate my way, blaming me for Rob's death and showing utter disgust towards my story. I have night terrors now. I lost a friend. I lost family. I lost my grip, it feels, on what reality even is. We went maybe 50 feet when a large rock slammed into the cave wall right next to me. The rock shattered into smaller pieces, some of which hit me in the face. We flung our flashlights in the direction the rock came from. This week's story is coming out of Colorado, where 3 guys narrowly escaped with their lives. Do not miss this thrilling story. Let's get into it. I'd like to tell you about me and my two friends' story. We encountered what I believe to be the fabled Bigfoot. On a warm summer night in the Colorado mountains, it was a typical camping trip for the three of us. Tents, sleeping bags, coolers of food, and at least twice as much beer than we could drink. We parked the truck about 20 minutes from our camping spot. We had to hike to it. There were no roads. We loved the seclusion and the privacy out there, where we could just goof off and drink and laugh all weekend with no eyes on us. Except this time, there were eyes on us. We got to our favorite spot about 3 hours before sundown on Thursday. Got unpacked, tents, sleeping bags, set up a fire, and then I heard the first beer crack, which kicked off the night. We were all pretty lubricated, if you know what I mean, by sundown. Tyler had gotten up to relieve himself on the outside perimeter of camp, just in the tree line. He came back to camp with his flies still down and all wide-eyed, and he said, I think I saw something in the woods. Now mind you, he was wobbling back and forth, his face was relaxed and slacked, almost like he had a stroke. He had no shoes on and his fly was still down. We all busted up laughing, kidding with him that he's already drank too much. Tyler, however, didn't find it funny, and he went straight to his tent. We all stayed up maybe another hour and turned ourselves in. The next morning, as I stepped out of the tent, I immediately realized that one of our food coolers was opened and everything was gone out of it. Now this is one of them camping bear-proof coolers. So my immediate thought was one of us drunken idiots got in the cooler last night and didn't latch the lid, and some animal like a raccoon or a bear got a free dinner. As Tyler and Jake got up, I asked them if they'd gotten the cooler last night. Both of them replied that they don't remember eating anything. I thought that was strange, but chalked it up to we drank a lot and one of us just don't remember getting into it. Tyler seen the cooler and I could see him turn white. I turned to him. You all right, bud? Tyler looked at me with a serious face. I know we was drinking, but I vividly remember seeing something in the woods last night. It was covered in hair and standing on two legs. It was 2 or 3 heads taller than me. Now keep in mind, Tyler was 6'4", so my immediate thought was maybe he just saw a bear standing on 2 legs. But Tyler followed up with, I tried to convince myself it was a bear, but it wasn't. It just couldn't be. I could make out the outline in the darkness. It was shaped far more like a man than a bear. It was huge and covered in hair. And now the cooler's been raided? I don't want to be here anymore. I want to leave. Jake immediately piped up. We just got here. And you're ready to leave because you think you saw something in the dark when you was hammered? And one of us left the cooler open, which a raccoon likely found, but you think it was your monster you saw? Come on, Tyler. What the fuck? Tyler hung his head low. Whatever. You're right. It was probably nothing. We sat around camp and visited and did a little fly fishing that day and was preparing for another night of beer drinking when the whole trip really started to turn south. We had a nice fire burning. It was about an hour after dark when a large stone just rolled into camp out of the darkness. We all saw it. We were all just staring at it. Jake was the first to speak. That raccoon found out how easy you scare Tyler. Now he's trying to scare you off to bed so he can get into our other cooler. I chuckled. Jake was laughing hard at his own joke. Tyler was still wide-eyed and staring at the rock like he didn't even hear a word Jake said. I leaned over towards Tyler. You good, Tyler? Then a loud snap. It sounded like a large branch being broken echoed across camp. We all jumped. Tyler sprang to his feet. He was in flight mode. You could see it in Tyler's eyes and the way he was standing, that he was ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. After a few moments, another stone rolled into camp from the darkness. At the sight of the second stone, Tyler leaped into his tent. Jake yelled out, "Knock it off!" and then yelled, "Ah! Get out of here, bear!" he was met with what sounded like a whole small tree snapping in two. "Jake, I don't think bears can throw stones." Jake's eyes widened with the realization of what I just said, and we both dove into our tents. I thought I could hear a little rustling around camp, but for the most part, the night was quiet. That morning, we got up and our second cooler was completely gone. After looking around for some time, Jake found it about 9 foot up in a tree. We got it down with some long branches we had found, and that's when we noticed the latches weren't just undone. They were completely tore off. Tyler, as you can imagine, was getting real flighty again, and that's when I seen the tree. The tree that we heard snap last night, only I was in disbelief. This tree had to have been 7 or 8 inches across, and it was snapped about 4 feet up. There is nothing out here that can do that. As I stood in disbelief, Jake and Tyler walked over and just stared in silence with me. After some time, Jake stood up. "Let's grab our packs, have a look around, see if we can figure out what this is." Tyler immediately rejected. "We need to leave." I remained quiet because I was on the fence between wanting to know what this was and leaving. Jake looked at Tyler. "It only comes out at night, and it's been too scared to approach all 3 of us. We'll be fine if we go together." After thinking about what Jake said, I agreed. I could see the desperate irritation on Tyler's face as he threw his hands up in the air. "Fine, let's march to our own deaths." We grabbed our packs and set out in the direction that we heard the noises, found the cooler and the broken tree. We were just looking for anything, a little bit of fur, tracks, scat, anything to give us an idea what this animal was. It didn't take us long, maybe 20 minutes, and we stumbled across the cave entrance. I grabbed my flashlight and went to take a peek. We'd found a good amount of caves out here before, and most were very small, sometimes only going 5 or 10 feet in before ending or being too narrow to get through. Once I went through the opening and shined my light around, I remember 2 distinct things. The awe, because this is the biggest cave I've ever found, and 2, the wet dog and skunk odor that permeated the air. I stuck my head back out the cave. "Hey, you guys gotta see this." Jake and Tyler entered with me. Tyler immediately let out a small gag. "What's that smell?" "I don't know what the smell is, but look at this cave, man." We shined our lights around and decided just to venture a little ways inside. The sense of discovery and adventure was just overpowering. We went maybe 50 feet when a large rock slammed into the cave wall right next to me. The rock shattered into smaller pieces, some of which hit me in the face. We flung our flashlights in the direction the rock came from. It was 8 or 9 feet tall, wide shoulders, covered in hair, and the face looked half primate, half human, and it looked pissed. Then I noticed Tyler bolting for the exit, which kicked in Jake and I's reflexes to do the same. As we ran out, this thing let out a growl that made me tremble. As we emerged from the cave, we kept hauling ass towards camp, and to our horror, heard limbs and branches snapping behind us. It was chasing us. All 3 of us could have won an Olympic race. The trees were a blur as we retraced our path back to camp. Once we reached camp, Tyler just kept on trucking. I wanted to grab a few of our more valuable items real quick, and just as I started to collect them, a huge rock hit Jake's tent, collapsing it in. I dropped what I had picked up, and Jake and I took off. Once we made it to the truck, Tyler already had it running, and we leaped into the bed as the tires spun in the dirt. Every now and then, we talk about what happened when we're good and drunk, and all 3 of us agree. We saw a Bigfoot. Real cryptid reports, told in immersive story format. This is the story channel that you've been waiting for. Today, guys, we got a story out of Michigan that's probably one of the scarier ones I've heard. Let's get into this story. It was 2022, and I was up near Grass Lake in Michigan. It was a normal, solo camping trip for the first 2 days. But on night 3, my world got flipped upside down. It was nearly a full moon. The lake was lit well, and I was taking a short stroll near the water's edge. I remember the sensation of being watched and the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I scanned my surroundings and could see fairly well, but everything went dark as I tried to look past the tree line. I turned around and started making my way nervously back to camp. That feeling of being watched was even stronger now. I could feel it following me, like an ominous presence. I quickened my pace. I threw another quick glance behind me, and when I looked back ahead, I stopped dead in my tracks. Between me and camp was a hulking 7 or 8 foot tall creature. It was standing on 2 legs like a man, extremely muscular with unusually long arms. The head is what put me the rest of the way into shock. Pointed canine ears with a wolf-like snout and piercing yellow eyes. Took a step towards me, but I was locked up in complete shock. Then 2 steps, 3 steps. My brain was screaming at me to run, but my body just wouldn't move. 4 steps, 5, 6. My body finally gave me control again. My fight or flight reflex took over all forms of thinking. I turned and sprinted back the other direction. After sprinting for a short while, I remember thinking, "You idiot, where are you going? You just got further from camp and your vehicle." But like I said, that flight response took over all thinking. Then I tripped hard over something. I smashed into the ground and hit my head pretty good. It didn't quite knock me out, but I could hear a long ringing in my ears and was seeing little spots of white. I fully came to and bounced back up. But before I could start running again, my whole body went numb with fear. I felt the breath of this thing kiss the back of my head. My mind raced with the image of this thing I just saw now standing behind me. It raced with all the ways it's about to kill me. Then everything went black. I came to lying in the most awkward, uncomfortable position. I was alone in the dark, now utterly confused. Did I fall and hit my head and that was all a dream? Or did I pass out when I felt it breathe on me? That question was answered as I heard a deep, powerful growl behind me in the darkness. I sprang up and bolted straight for my truck. I know it followed me all the way to the truck. I could feel it. But I never looked back. I got to my truck and left all my camp supplies and got the hell out of there. It's tough for me to tell this story. It hurts my pride admitting that I passed out due to fear. But this was a creature of nightmares, and I'm telling you, they do exist. We both felt an incredible sense of relief that this nightmare was finally over. We couldn't have been more wrong. Today I've got a report coming out of Colorado that you're gonna love. If there's any truth at all to this story, the terror these guys must have felt had to have been just unreal. Let's get into it. It was 2007, deep in the Colorado mountains. My friend Bill and I were out on our yearly elk hunt. We had a primitive cabin up there tucked back in some trees far from any trails or roads. Night number 1 at the cabin was pretty typical. We got all our stuff unpacked and situated, ate a bite, then got hammered on whiskey. Day 1 was pretty typical too. We woke up with a massive hangover and vowed next year we wouldn't celebrate the first night with whiskey. This would be, I'd say, the 10th year in a row we said this now. By the afternoon, we were feeling a little better and decided to go to our pre-discussed locations and watch for elk until nightfall. We walked for about, I'd say a mile until we got to a clearing, which was our landmark to go our separate directions. We agreed to meet back at the clearing between 6:30 and 6:45 to finish our hike out together. After an uneventful afternoon, I arrived back at the clearing right at 6:30. and Bill was already there, hunched down and acting strange. I could see the relief in his eyes when he saw me. "What's wrong, Bill?" His voice was quiet and slightly shaking. Something has been following me, and I caught a short glimpse of it. It's huge. It must be 8 feet tall. Now immediately my mind went straight to Black Bear. He saw a black bear in the shadows that had stood up. But before I could even say it, Bill followed up with it, and it wasn't no damn black bear. Just then we both heard 2 loud knocks on a tree. We froze and tried to look in the direction of the noise, but saw nothing. I looked over at Bill. "Come on, Bill. Let's get back to the cabin." We got maybe 200 yards and we heard a loud whoop. I don't know how else to describe it other than something making a whooping sound, followed by another 2 knocks. At this point, I was spooked. I've never heard anything like this, and I started freaking out myself. Even more because we have all heard the stories of Bigfoot knocking on trees and making a whooping sound. And that's the only thing my mind could determine it was. We quickened our pace. We could hear branches snap every now and then behind us, making us jump and turn around with our flashlights, desperately trying to see what was stalking us. We got maybe 3/4 of the way to the cabin when Bill froze and stuck his arm out to stop me. I looked over at him. "What are you doing, Bill?" He slowly raised his hand and pointed. I trained my eye on the direction his finger was pointing, and my blood ran cold. Only partially covered by a tree was something standing on 2 legs and covered in fur. As my flashlight slowly hit the creature, I saw its face, like an ape and a human mixed together. It flinched a little when my light hit its eyes, and then I heard a loud bang. Bill had just shot his rifle in this thing's direction. The creature flinched and let out what I can only describe as an angry growl as it disappeared into the woods at a mind-blowing speed. I looked at Bill. "I think you just pissed it off." Bill didn't respond. He just started sprinting towards the cabin. Once we made it to the cabin, slammed the door behind us, we both felt an incredible sense of relief that this nightmare was finally over. We couldn't have been more wrong. We sat in silence. Partly I think with shock, and partly we were intently listening for anything outside. After some time of hearing nothing, I lit a lantern, and Bill looked at me and said, "What the hell was that?" I replied, "I think we both know what that was." We both just stared at each other. Neither of us wanted to say Bigfoot out loud. Then a loud, heavy thump against the cabin wall made us both jump and let out a little scream even. Whatever that was, it hit the wall so hard I felt the vibrations through the floor. We both grabbed our rifles and sat in complete fear. Then another loud thump that shook the floor. Bill put the lantern out so we could see out the windows a little better. Just as he did, I watched a dark figure pass by the window. Then, the front door was hit. There was 2. This went on for at least an hour, and by this time we concluded there was at least 3 different creatures out there. We were shaking and weak from being filled with adrenaline for an hour straight. Then at the door again was 2 loud thumps. It almost looked like the door was gonna bust in. I saw Bill raise his rifle, and I quickly grabbed the barrel and pulled it down. "What are you thinking? We can't piss them off anymore. They could get in here easy if they wanted to." Bill lowered his gun. "We shoot if one comes in." I nodded in agreement. These things terrorized us the entire night, relentlessly. Right at dawn is when it finally all stopped. We waited about an hour before peeking outside. When we determined the coast was clear, we got the hell out of there. Bill and I never went back to our little cabin, and I really truly do miss it. But you couldn't get either one of us to ever stay there again if our life depended on it. So I think what we can learn from this is if you ever see a Bigfoot, don't shoot at it. I had a story turned into me about a guy who said he made friends with a Bigfoot when he was a kid. Now, whether you believe his story or not, it's still an awesome story to listen to. Let's get into it. When I was 8 years old, I made friends with a Bigfoot. You don't have to believe my story. Trust me, I'm 42 years old now and I've been criticized and called crazy more times than you can count. But nonetheless, even if you don't believe, it's still a damn good story to listen to. I was about 8 years old and we lived on a nice little patch of land in central Colorado. Mountains, forests, crystal clear streams and meadows. It was truly a heavenly place to grow up. This spring brought an unexpected surprise, and it changed my life forever. I remember I was down by the creek looking for quartz crystal and cool rocks when I heard what I can only describe as a whoop. I looked around a little confused. I've never heard an animal make that sound before. Then I heard two knocks or thumps, like something hitting a tree with something heavy. I trained my eye on the direction of the noise, and that's when I first saw him. About half his body and half his face was sticking out from behind a tree looking at me. It was huge, much taller than Dad, and he's like 6'2". It was covered in fur and had a face like a mixture between a human and an ape. I dropped all my rocks and the really nice quartz crystal I'd just found at the edge of the stream and bolted off to the house. I tried to tell Mom and Dad what I saw, and that's when I experienced my very first rejection and criticism over my sighting. Mom told me I had a very good imagination, and Dad told me if I did see something, it sounds like a bear and I need to be careful. The next day, I went outside and went to play in my tree house that Dad built me when I was 6. It was about 8 feet off the ground with a ladder for me to get up. I climbed up the ladder and I froze when I got to the top. Right on the edge of the floor, where the ladder comes up, was my crystal I dropped and a few random rocks. I instantly knew that thing must have put them there. But why? Was he trying to be friends? I bolted inside again and said, "See, I'm not crazy. It left my rocks and crystal in the fort for me." I was met with, "You probably left those up there the last time you played and forgot about them." I was crushed and I gave up completely, trying to convince my parents what was going on. I decided to grab a bag and put a carrot, an apple, and a slice of cheese in it. I went back down to the stream where I last saw the creature, and went over to the tree I last saw him. I climbed the tree about 7 feet up and hung the bag where I hoped no animal other than my potential new friend could reach it. The next morning, I couldn't contain myself. I ran out the house and down to the creek to see if the bag was still there, and it was not. The bag was gone, and at the base of the tree was a pile of rocks, I'm assuming as a gift. There was nothing special about the rocks, they were just normal rocks. But they were super special to me, because it was a gift from this huge creature, who must think any rock is what I like since it saw me collecting them 2 days ago. I ran back to the house and made another goodie bag to hang in the tree, and I traded food for rocks with this thing daily for a couple weeks. Then I remember one evening I got out a little late to hang the goodie bag. It was almost dark. The excitement of it all was starting to fade a little, and I had a huge collection of rocks now. As I was hanging the bag, I heard it again. Whoop! I immediately looked in the direction, and there it was again, half obscured by a tree just looking at me. Hey guys, real quick before we finish this story, if you enjoy how we're telling real cryptid encounters in an immersive story format, please drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn notifications on. We only upload once a week, and it's really easy for a small channel like this one to get buried in your feed. You guys are always very encouraging and kind in the comments. Today I've got a special favor to ask of you. Jen Yuva is our editor, and she's the one that brings these videos to life for you with videos and sounds and images. Do me a favor, go down in the comments and just thank Jen for what she does on these videos. Now let's get back to that story. There it was again, half obscured by a tree and just looking at me. Then it reached down and grabbed a rock, looked at me for a moment, and gently underhand tossed the rock to my feet. I was overjoyed, and in my excitement I launched the goodie bag in its direction. I nearly hit him, and he flinched a little as the bag flew past him. He then turned, grabbed the bag, and disappeared into the woods. The trading and interactions like the one I just told you about went off and on for the next 2 years. We got comfortable enough with each other. Sometimes while I was playing at the stream, I would see him sitting and just hanging out not too far away, often further downstream just on the bank. I like to think we were buds. Social distancing buds. We never got closer than I'd say 100 or 150 feet, but I preferred it that way, and so did he. My parents sold our house, and we moved when I was almost 11. I cried and begged to stay. Years later, when I was 17, I drove out to our old property and talked to the owners and just asked if I could take a walk to recall some memories. They agreed, and I went straight down to the creek. My heart was broken when I saw the piles of rocks everywhere that I was never able to collect or trade back for. I stayed late into the evening and never saw or heard my old friend. As I was leaving, the owner came out and asked me if I enjoyed my time. It was a mixture of happiness and sadness. And then he asked me, "Do you know anything about these rocks getting piled up everywhere? All I can think is some kids are playing down there, but I never see them." I just smiled a big smile and said, "No, I couldn't tell you. That's pretty strange. Maybe you ought to try hanging a goodie bag up down there with some apples or something in it just to see what happens." From all the reports I've read and watched and had turned into me, I'm really starting to think that if you believe in Bigfoot and Dogman and all these other things, it really seems like, just like humans, there's good ones and there's bad ones. What do you guys think? That's going to do it for today, and as always, keep an open mind, and I'll see you in the next one.